Well, welcome to Earth Day 2019. This is a picture taken on Christmas Day, 1968, by Apollo 8 astronaut Frank Borman. He read from Genesis as the command module was circling the moon for the first time. This is the first lunar expedition. A lot of people saw that picture of the Earth over the moon and changed their minds about the way the Earth is. It's not infinite, it's not vast, it's small blue dot out in the universe. Today I'm going to talk about some controversial topics. This is my opinion. You may disagree. But I think there's room for agreement on the solutions, so if you'll bear with me. There are many environmental challenges today. Let me show you some of them. This is a picture showing carbon dioxide levels taken from ice core data in Antarctica. It shows it rises and falls for the last 400,000 years. But then, in the late 1800s and the beginning of the 20th century, it spikes. And it's continuing to rise. This slide is now obsolete. As a consequence of this rise in CO2, we have this chart. This is from 1880 to now. And the blue columns are showing below average temperatures through most of the 20th century. And then after 1980 to now, we have above average temperatures. And I don't think you can see it, but the black triangles on the top of the graph indicate record warm years. As a consequence of the warming, we have a melt of sea ice, which causes feedback loops. There's ice melting all over the world, Greenland, Antarctica, glaciers in our national parks, and this one shows sea ice in the Arctic. So you can see 1984 in the upper left, and then 2012 and 2017, a much reduced sea ice. And there's a feedback loop because the ice reflects the sunlight back into outer space. Without it, it's absorbed. This may not look like much compared to the other graphs, but there is change happening, the way people are adapting to this changing climate. This shows the annual per capita electricity generation in the United States. You can see for decades it's rising. Then in the 2000s it levels off, and now it's declining. And right here in the Abilene area, we have one of the world's largest wind turbine power plants. That's a picture of the Horse Hollow wind turbine power plant. And you can also see a map of the United States showing the amount of megawatts generated by wind per state. And you can notice that Texas has nearly 25,000 megawatts. All right, so we do face many environmental challenges. Industrial pollution of our air and water, the loss of species around the world that we face a mass extinction event, and perhaps the most catastrophic of all, global climate change due to human burning of fossil fuels. Your generation has already had to deal with many of these effects that previous generations put on this planet, from rising sea levels to the protracted or greatly protracted fire season and hurricanes that are more powerful. I believe that solving these problems will be one of the greatest challenges humanity has ever faced. And face this challenge we must, for our survival will depend on it. It will require the greatest effort of individuals, industry, and governments. I reject the argument put forth on nearly a daily basis that caring for the environment is a choice between the environment and jobs. For example, there are already more wind power jobs than coal power plant jobs. Already Texas gets more power from the wind than it does coal power. And as I speak, there is a solar energy boom going on in the state. Perhaps never in human history has a change in our energy sources occurred more quickly than today. I am certain that a clean environment will produce better careers, a better health for us, and sustain the animals and plants on which we depend. The challenges are great, but with God's help, they are not impossible. We need science to tell us that these changes are occurring. However, we need our faith and some biblical principles to direct us on how we should respond. Psalm 119, 36 through 37, turn my heart toward your statutes and not toward selfish gain. Turn my eyes away from worthless things. Preserve my life according to your word. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Therefore, we must give the land and waters of the earth a Sabbath. Exodus 23:10 through 11. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest crops. But during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what you leave. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. You may ask, I'm just one person. What possible impact could I have on these global problems? So here's what you can do. Buy used, especially your house, and buy less. Give your stuff away when you no longer need it. Your generation already does this better than my generation. For example, Goodwill is overflowing with donations. Also, you do not buy as much as my generation. 2, turn off lights and other appliances when not in use. Use energy-efficient appliances, including lights. This is already working. You saw the slide with the per capita electricity generation. With the use of LED light bulbs and other energy-efficient appliances for the first time in 75 years, the kilowatt per capita electric generation is falling. More must be done. Buy fuel-efficient cars or use mass transit when available. Your generation drives less than mine, and modern cars are more fuel-efficient and pollute less than older ones. A better idea than driving at all is to walk or ride a bike when possible. Riding bikes and walking are great benefits for your health and the health of our planet. Shop at a farmer's market, number 5. These markets support the local economy and saves energy because you are not buying a product from the other side of the earth or that was transported from the other side of the earth. Use reusable shopping bags instead of plastic and recycle. It takes less energy and materials to make new products from recycled materials than to produce it from raw materials. Stop using straws and lids at restaurants. If you're not putting that drink in the car, you do not need that straw or lid. Stop using single-use plastics. 7, plant a tree. This is a carbon sink for the carbon already in the atmosphere. And also garden helps that as well. In spite of the data presented in my slides, I am sure in the audience there are some climate skeptics. And you may ask, why should I do these things? Well, nearly every one of those on the list saves you money, especially changing the lights and riding the bike. I believe, however, the goal of zero-emission economy cannot be postponed. This goal could serve to challenge both the way we use resources, and it will require the intellectual investment of young people like you that was of the type we mustered to put the first humans on the moon. I see many benefits, not just for the United States, but for every country on earth. Every country can become energy independent with renewables or zero-emission fuel sources. Imagine a country never having to import fuel of any kind. Every city, state, and country would have access to its own renewable or zero-emission fuels. On this campus, there are scientists and engineers developing the components of a new nuclear zero-emission fuel. There are some countries in the world that are well on their way to energy independence using renewables. These include both rich and poor countries, such as Costa Rica, Uruguay, Paraguay, Ethiopia, Iceland, and Denmark. Finally, I believe that we are God's caretakers. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and care for it. With God's help, nothing is impossible. We can rise to these challenges, we can change how we use things, we can reuse, and we can restore the earth. Thank you.